One. Hello, everyone. It's Doug Woodward once again. We are so happy to be able to bring you another episode of The Hot Seat. Tonight, I've got a good friend, John Haller, who's going to be batting ideas back and forth with me. John has quite an impressive background. In a moment, I'll ask him to tell you a little bit about that. But he's also been very involved in ministry over the last 2 or 3 years. That's not his day job, but he does spend nights and weekends at it. And tonight, we're going to try to deal with a lot of world events and then just some general topics and prophecy. And one thing in particular, which I really want to pick John's brain on, is just how he sees the prophetic teaching sort of evolving over the last 10 years. Because as John told me in the warm up here, you know, this is the subject matter and what we're dealing with. Nobody could have called this. So it's a lot of things are happening that were not expected. Let's put it that way. So
happening much more quickly.
Yes,
than we ever thought.
Exactly right. Yeah, one of John's key themes is the confluence of events, and he does a program every week, which I watch quite a few of them, and I jokingly call John my Kiplinger letter of prophetic events. And for those of you that take the Kiplinger letter, you know exactly what I mean. For those of you that don't, never mind. It's an inside joke. So welcome, John. It's great to have you. Great to have you.
So if you want a little on my background,
please.
I don't know that it's that impressive. I've been effectively a trial lawyer since 1980. But last year, in fact, I actually sort of told my firm I was thinking about retiring, and then a strange convergence of events. A couple of clients called me up to do work for them, and they're some of my favorite clients, mainly because they pay full rate and they pay quickly and on time. So I did a couple big foreclosure cases on commercial properties for those. And I still have one or two other little matters that I'm closing up. So I kind of work part-time. If the foreclosure thing takes off after this pandemic thing is ever over, which I don't think it's ever going to be over, it's an insane time because they shut down the evictions, they shut down foreclosures. But then the people who own those properties, they still have to pay their banks and everything, and they're not. And then people are like, "Well, I don't want to pay rent. You know, go ahead, sue me. Well, I can sue you, but I can't get you evicted." So it's a crazy time.
You try some very interesting cases, and unfortunately, the mess that's been going on in the federal government has finally reached out and bitten you as well.
Yeah, you know, and what I see going on with the FBI now is a much higher level, what I would consider to be corruption and politicization than it was even back in 13 years ago when we were trying this case. So it doesn't bode well for America the way this is going. I'm very troubled by what I see going on. I was an elder at a very large church here for many years. I was on a college and seminary board of trustees. Things just weren't quite going the way I thought they should go, with certain teachings and that type of thing creeping in. And I'm not the kind of person to keep my mouth shut. That was not well appreciated. Long story short, we left the church. A small group of people left with us, and we started a small church called Fellowship Bible Chapel in mid 2013. Brought a full-time pastor in. We had 3 elders, and we were sort of rotating the teaching. And then I was doing my prophecy update each week as well. 2014, we decided, hey, let's do a conference and let's live stream it. So we rented a box, and we got a pretty good response. You know, we had David Hawking and Jacob Prash and myself did the conference. We had like 3,000 people watching online. It's like, they don't even know who we are. What is going on? We started in 2013 putting up my teachings on YouTube and the church teachings. I think the first year we had 26,000 views total. Then it went to like 225 the next year. Then it went to over 1 million. And now I think we're doing over a couple million a year. We're still relatively small.
But that's impressive.
Potatoes, you know, and I don't think I appeal to a lot of people. I try to do a little bit deeper dive. into the issues. And most of my weeks I'm up there at a minute or an hour 25. Last week I think was an hour 45 minutes, and the world. What was it? The world turned upside down.
Yeah, and that was 7 years ago. What does it mean about the world now?
Yeah, that was. I guess we didn't call that one, did we?
Yeah, we thought maybe that was as crazy as it could get right then.
Well, it's sort of like the world's rolling downhill, so it's flipping upside down. Every other roll.
Right.
But I remember Gons. Gons was doing the editing on that, and I remember I sent him my presentation so he could edit it in. He goes, "How does anybody do 110 slides in a 55-minute talk?" And I said, "Well, easy. I skipped 50 of them." So
that's right. This is a library, this is a database.
It's like, the one saying that I used a lot is a quote. I think it comes from A Sun Also Rises by Hemingway. There's two characters in the book that they're talking. And the one guy says to the other, he goes, "Well, how did you go bankrupt?" And the guy goes, "Well, in two ways. I went bankrupt in two ways. Gradually, then suddenly." Now, I'm not ascribing prophetic significance to the words of Hemingway, but I think it's sort of applicable to Bible prophecy, and as we've seen things unfold, as you mentioned, we were talking before. We studied this thing, Doug. You've studied it. You've written books on it. I spend 25, 30 hours a week preparing my update and doing things, and I do all the graphics. Everything is.
Oh, that's great.
We're a small church. We're like 60 people. And I sort of taught myself like PowerPoint and graphics and video editing because I was traveling a lot. I was gone from home, 225 or more nights a year on this one big case I had particularly in Boston. And so I just, at night in the hotel room, I would prepare my update and read and do PowerPoint, figure out how to do it and the editing and stuff. But so we're all preparing, we're all reading this stuff, we're all looking at the scripture, we're all looking at this, and lo and behold, what do we have is nobody called 2020 and 2021. We have to admit that.
That's right.
That the events that have unfolded have sort of, gobsmacked all of us, if you will, that we just didn't see that these things were coming exactly. So I think that from my own standpoint is I always encourage myself and others to be a little bit humble about our positions. That there's and when you participate in some of these Facebook prophecy groups that I sort of am a member of, everybody's got it figured out. Okay, but here's the thing: is nobody agrees.
Right.
Okay, there's differences everywhere. So I kind of put things into baskets of possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
I did a talk in Canada recently. By the way, let me just back up. So Fellowship Bible Chapel, you can check out our YouTube channel. We're also on Rumble at Real FBC. There's also, I do post from time to time at RTN TV. There's an app for RTN Remnant Truth Network that some of us started up about a year ago just to have a backup place. And I do preach one Sunday a month at our church, a conference in Canada, Last Days Bible Conference, a virtual conference, of course. So we did it virtually. So in my talk, one of my talks was a thing called Deplatforming Humanity. It was about the Great Reset, the Great Revealing of the Great Setup, I called it. There was a subtitle. And I did a thing in that which sort of, I kind of thought about what's the grid that I use to look at all these Bible prophecy things that are happening. So I use the acronym ACLU,
Right.
Acceleration. Things are happening much, much more quickly that I think are related to Bible prophecy. They're just accelerating like crazy. And there's a Jewish pattern for that we can talk about in a little bit. The second one was convergence. All these different lines of Bible prophecy are happening at the same time, whether it's global government, setting up the beast system, the geopolitical aspect of Bible prophecy, the Israel part of Bible prophecy. It's converging all at the same time. And I liken that, the convergence, to like the vortex of a tornado.
Hmm.
all the lines intersect. And so it creates this very turbulent time. So ACLU, L would be, and this is one we might want to talk about a little bit, logistics.
Hmm.
I think that's I don't think a lot of people talk about that the prophecies have a logistics aspect to them. For example, the Ezekiel 38, 39 that we all love to talk about.
Right.
But there's a logistics there because it says a great company and a mighty army. Well, what does that look like exactly? And how does that come together? Or Babylon. There are different views of Babylon. Your view, of course, is the United States is Babylon or the daughter of Babylon.
Mm-hmm.
Others say it's Rome, it's a revived Roman Empire. Some say it's Jerusalem, and others say it's a rebuilt Babylon in Iraq. And I'm like, okay, well, so I'm not dismissing any one of those necessarily. I think they're all worthy of examining and looking at. And some might say that it's a Neom is, a new city being built in Saudi Arabia.
Right.
Might be the final Babylon. But if it's Babylon in Iraq, there's a logistical aspect to it. If it's supposed to be this great commercial center of the earth, Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither was Babylon. And then the future Babylon's not going to be built in a day either. And people say, well, it could happen very quickly. And maybe it's a virtual Babylon, for all I know.
Right.
But if it's Babylon in Iraq, you look at Dubai in the United Arab Emirates, and it's taken really 25 years, really more like 40 years for that fantastic commercial city that sits there in the Persian Gulf to come together. Oman has been built over the last 25 years, or Qatar has been built over the last 25 years. Doha, the city of Doha in Qatar. So these things don't happen overnight,
The question, I guess, is feasibility. Logistics. What is the feasibility of a particular doctrine or particular point of view? Is it at all logical? And of course, that's one of the things I've, sort of the Chris Putnam, the late Chris Putnam, he wrote the foreword to the final Babylon. And in that book, he said, it's pretty obvious that if the Lord were to return right now, that America would have to be the final Babylon because no one else could qualify.
I think that is a realistic thing. So what if this is the time? Okay, so if this is the time, and frankly, it was the book that you and Doug Krieger and Dean McGriff did that kind of got me thinking that, I'm not sure I agree with it, but I think it's worthy of considering. But if this is the time, there's a logistics aspect to this thing that has to be satisfied for these prophecies to be fulfilled, just like all the things that relate to the regathering of the Jewish people in large part in forming a nation. I think this is stated and implied in a lot of the end times Bible prophecy, especially Ezekiel 34 through 39. You got to have a Jewish nation there. It doesn't work otherwise. But they got to get there, and they got to become something that people need to deal with. And look at what's happened over the last, the Netanyahu administration. Israel's become a world economic power, and it's considered, I think, to be the 8th most powerful military in the world. And as you go there, it's this little tiny place. You can easily drive most of the country in a day. And look at how it's risen and the speed with which it's risen. When you look at it in context, I remember in 1967, my dad loved Bible prophecy. He was a pastor for 40 years, and before he passed away in 1991. But in 1967, I remember, I have his notes. He was going crazy because of the 6-Day War. And it's interesting, we were able to go to Israel in 2017 for the 50th anniversary celebration of that. And a day when, we're in Jerusalem, we were there, Trump came the week before, and then we're there on Yom Yerushalayim, Jerusalem Day. And they say this is the most people who have been in Jerusalem ever in its history. It was it was, for me, it was an incredibly emotional thing. I mean, it made me cry. You saw the Jewish people celebrating their nation and the reunification of their city in 1967, and it just was the march of flags or parade of flags that they have, and these young kids, yeshiva after yeshiva after yeshiva, you know, with like 50, 100, usually young Jewish guys, marching down, singing, carrying the flags, celebrating down Jaffa Street. It just incredibly.
This was 2017, the 50th.
2017, in May of 2017.
Right.
Even though it happened on our calendar in June, they, of course, their calendar is always.
It's lunar based, so it's a little bit.
Yeah. Different. So it's a little bit different. So it was in late May that celebration took place, and it was a phenomenal time to be there and see this. And having been there in 95 and 2011 and then 2017, the building that had gone on in Jerusalem and all over Israel was just mind-boggling, and the development and the reclamation of the land and the trees and all of this stuff. It was, but all that is part of the Bible prophecy picture, and it doesn't unfold overnight. So it's gradually, then suddenly.
Right.
And so I think over the last year and a half, we're sort of in the suddenly phase of a lot of these things. It's just like, where did that come from? I didn't see that one coming.
Right.
And we've always talked about, you know, the mark of the beast system. And I don't think we're at it yet, but certainly whether this is it or not, this vaccine passport and stuff that they want to put in, it's certainly looks more like anything like this mark of the beast system than anything we've ever seen before.
Right.
And it's coming, and it's like unfolding, like every day it's more and more certain that this is going to be introduced and implemented. And it's
you've hit a lot of the issues, which I appreciate. I get people say you interrupt too much, so I was trying not to interrupt you. But you have good things to say, so I didn't really want to interrupt you. But I wanted to run through. I jotted down 12. I consider them significant issues, and I wanted to.
So this is the hot seat part starting.
Yeah,
now,
this is the hot seat part. So I wanted to.
I didn't wear a collared shirt, so I can't. It won't feel like it's tightening.
Well, you might want to put some ice packs around your back or something, just to kind of keep you cool. But
I can crank my fan up here. So.
There you go. So I thought what I'd do is I would go through and I'd have you score these 10 issues, and we'll see what kind of average we come up with. But these are 10 issues, and some of these they're relatively new, or they're relatively more pointed right now than they have been, you know, a few years ago, or even a year ago. So, all right. So what I was going to do is have you rate these things on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 was going to be, hey, no problem, no big deal, no worries. The halfway point, I was going to call it debilitating, meaning that it's definitely having a deleterious impact upon our country. This is from the United States perspective, right? And then 10 means that it's probably a fatal blow. So
yeah, okay.
We'll see what you say. All right.
So this is sort of like the McDonald's survey, so you can get a free sandwich.
Yeah,
highly satisfied.
Right. Yes.
Highly likely, unlikely. Don't bother me again. So
it may not be quite the Letterman top 10, but you know, it's
yeah.
We'll see what kind of fun we have with
this. You know, right? I was a big fan of David Letterman when I went to law school in Indianapolis.
He's sister, a good Indiana boy, isn't he?
He was actually, I clerked for his attorney. I never met David, but in about 1983, we went to New York. Pam had a seminar. I had work up there. So we were up there for like 2 weeks. So we went over to Letterman show, and I got called up out of the audience in the pre-show because I had made a smart aleck comment in my questionnaire, and I received I don't know if you can see this, the Late Night with David Letterman.
Oh yeah, it's coming through clear.
Official,
Is that a sponge?
It's the official Late Night with David Letterman sponge. That was my prize for getting up there and being embarrassed a little bit in front of the crowd. We sat in front of our Jimmy Buffett was there that night, and
we call that consideration, right? From a legal.
That's right. Yeah. So but David, he came out and we just had a short encounter there in front of the crowd. So that was kind of
a ball.
But he did the top 10 list, and I love the top 10 list. So
it's always good. All right. So here we go. Buckle your seatbelt here. All right. Is this a 1 or a 10 or somewhere in between? The South China Sea, the possible attack on Taiwan. This is again from the United States' perspective.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of
how would it affect the United States, foreign policy?
Well, a month ago, I would have put it on a scale of 5 as to whether it was going to happen in the near term.
Right.
Now I would put it at a 9 or 10 in the near term, because the debacle that has taken place in Afghanistan over the last 2 weeks,
right,
has just sort of indicated that the United States cannot be trusted. China came out as this thing was unfolding in Kabul and Afghanistan with our hostages and everything. As this thing unfolded in Afghanistan over the last couple of weeks, China actually came out, and they have some, the Global Times is a Chinese government mouthpiece. So if you want to know what the Xi regime in China is thinking, you can kind of track that, that newspaper. And in that newspaper, they actually had an editorial, and it essentially just said, hey, Taiwan, you think the US is going to come help you? They're not coming. And so we've seen these overflights and that sort of thing recently. Yes. Now, the Chinese invasion of Taiwan will be logistically a very, very difficult thing for them to accomplish. And I'm not sure they're there. That's why I say it's probably a 9. But I think it soon will trend to a 10, that something will happen, just because the United States looks so incredibly weak right now. Here we are. I still think we have military superiority over other armies in the world, but China is,
well, in certain categories.
Yeah,
they have, plus if you're dealing once again with logistics and just the land area, and I think it was MacArthur that said that the United States should never fight a war in Asia, because you can't deal with Russia, you can't deal with China. It's just it's so vast. You can't win a war there.
Well, geopolitically, the United States is blessed geographically like no other place on the planet.
Right.
And this from your book, that we have our breadbasket is centered around rivers that are navigable to the Gulf and to the Atlantic through the St. Lawrence Seaway. Right. We have, relative peace with our neighbors north and south. We have oceans on both sides. I mean, wasn't there a book written called The Inevitable Empire?
Well, there's one called The Accidental Empire.
Okay.
That's about the high tech.
Okay. Well,
yeah.
In some respects, I've seen George Friedman at Stratfor wrote a good article on this about just the geographic thing of the United States, the transportation system, the water transportation, which is always the cheapest. And so we just are sort of blessed geographically. And China's not. China's very much the opposite. Russia's even worse, not having really until recently,
essentially landlocked.
Yeah, they're essentially, they don't have a warm water seaport. They've taken over the thing in the Black Sea, but that's subject to being shut off by Erdogan in Turkey,
Istanbul.
Yeah, and I mean that's kind of a narrow,
very narrow, 17 miles, I think. Yeah.
So that's why I think they wanted the port down in Syria,
sure,
in Tartarus.
Right.
But anyway, so the thing with China and Taiwan is, I think China will do it eventually. I would put it at a 9 now, but could trend very quickly to a 10, depending on how things unfold over the next 6 months. Look, China has developed a lot of, now they're talking about 350 or so new missile silos that are appearing. I think China's trying to say that it's just windmills. that you're seeing from space.
Okay.
You know,
very,
very convenient.
very unfriendly windmills.
But you know, there's also good intel that China has a network of tunnels, underground tunnels that are probably over 3,000 miles.
Right.
So I don't think they have the amphibious landing capabilities yet, although they now have more ships in their Navy than the United States does. And then sort of the trump card that China has developed, and to some extent Russia, are these hypersonic missiles.
Right.
So the United States has more aircraft carriers than all the rest of the world combined.
Right.
Easily.
Mm-hmm.
But now we have this hypersonic missile that one missile could take out an aircraft carrier. And that's just is a game changer.
It is.
And I think we may touch on this when you talk about the development of drones. My friend Seth Frantzman of the Jerusalem Post just has a new book on the drone warfare that's coming out, and how it's very asymmetrical and everything. So China, though, relative to the United States, just on the Taiwan issue, that is something I think everybody needs to watch.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if that's Bible prophecy other than the wars and rumors of wars part.
Well, I think from the standpoint of you in our audience, you have some people that might say, well, gee, I wonder how this squares with the final Babylon and so forth. And others that just say, gee, I want to know what is the future of America and all these issues. You know, you guys read a lot and you think about these things a lot. So we'd like to know what you think. So that's why I'm asking you the question.
So relative so if we talk about the future of America, I'm not very optimistic right now. Right. We have been through a revolution without a shot being fired.
Right.
Well, not too many shots being fired.
Right.
But and this is from you're a better historian than I am,
mm-hmm.
but that this has been going on for a long time, that the takedown of America and what they've been teaching in schools and universities and that sort of thing. So
totally.
We talk about critical race theory, and it's not so much, I don't mind that people learn about critical race theory, but it's the implementation and the policy aspects of critical race theory that bother me.
Yeah.
But I was at the beginning of my senior year of high school 50 years ago. That's very
back in the olden days.
Yeah, back when gas was 25 cents a gallon. And
I remember those days. I was a kid.
And so look, I'm 67. I am too. I'm sort of semi-retired now.
Mm.
And I say to my wife all the time, I'm glad I'm not starting out right now. I'm glad I'm at the end of my career when I can study the things that I want to study. But but it's still, but we're never able to have children, but I have great nieces and one great nephew at least for the next few weeks. So
all right, I'm gonna try to move things from from foreign policy back to domestic issues to some extent here, with one exception here at the end. Okay, let's talk about again, 1, not a problem. 10, could be fatal to the United States. Possibility of Russian nuclear weapons superiority.
Well, that's, I would put that in the 7 or 8 range. Mm-hmm. I think it's a big problem.
I'm going to score you, by the way, as we go along here. I'm going to track what you're saying.
Okay.
We're going to say 9 on the South China Sea, and we're going to say 8 on the Russians. All right.
Look, it's always hard to know what Russia is doing, really, because there's, when we were growing up, there was the Great Cold War and Russian propaganda. And at the height of the Cold War, I think Russia employed over 1 million people in the field of propaganda.
Hmm.
Well, when the Soviet Union fell between 1989 and 1991, those people didn't just disappear. So they sort of were subsumed within the Russian Federation. And so there's always a propaganda aspect to when you're dealing with Russia. But, I think Russia has been very effective. I think they have developed some pretty amazing weapons, and I would not dismiss them at all. I was just seeing something about, the Arctic is essentially melting, which is opening it up to Russian influence. And then you have this, whatever they call that Poseidon missile that, goes 120 miles, the nuclear missile that can circle, nuclear powered missile or torpedo.
Circle the globe almost.
Yeah, almost undetected, and it goes so fast. So Russia could just maybe they would nuke the coast of the what is it, the Azores, that people have said would collapse and cause this giant tidal wave to take out the east coast of the United States. And it's like, oh well, gee, we didn't. What do you mean it was our bomb? It was just a naturally occurring earthquake. But but they have also developed hypersonic missile technology. I've seen it. I think Putin in 2019 did a big talk in front of everybody, and they showed these amazing videos. I do follow the Russian military YouTube channel. It's amazing what they put on there in terms of their weapons and their S-300, S-400, and I think they're the
S-500.
S-500s now.
Right. It's due out now. Basically.
Yeah, so they have a YouTube channel, the Russian military YouTube channel, and thankfully you can you
can get some intelligence, can't you, just by watching?
Yeah, and with Google Translate, there's some things we like Google for. You can just cut and paste stuff in there, and you can figure out pretty much what they're saying.
Right.
Putin has been very clever the way he's consolidated power and money. And the way they've developed this nuclear technology. They have really focused on something. Look, we have not really updated our nuclear technology.
Right.
And to be honest with you, that may be good in a way, because if this EMP thing is true, our technology may be old enough that it would survive an EMP attack on the nuclear side.
I'm not sure about that, but
well,
that's an interesting thought.
That's the way to be optimistic. So you can sleep at night.
Right. I'd say the one comment I'll make, because I'm talking to you, and you're the guy on the program, you're the guest, is the Russian defense missiles. The number of anti-missiles that they have, I think, is numbering like 14,000, and America's anti-missile missiles are like about 80. In Vandenberg Air Force Base and a few up in Montana.
Yeah,
and and so we have some pretty spectacular defensive capabilities on our destroyers, and so the Hawaiian Islands might be well protected, and we can protect Japan. But protecting the American mainland is another question.
Well, we hope to be out in South Dakota in the near future, and a friend of mine who was Army Ranger, Special Forces, CIA, that type of thing, he said, hey, if you're in South Dakota, they're near the Badlands, you can go by the Minuteman Missile Museum right there on Interstate 90. And my fear is going there, I might think that I'm looking at the current state of American missile technology.
Right.
There's a museum about it already. It's just stuff you could put in a museum, and that's troubling. And you cannot expect the current administration to do anything to stop that. So the people in this administration, like the prior president, who I suspect is still putting things in place, I used to say about him is, what did he ever do that did not advance the interest of Russia?
Yeah. Yeah.
Seriously.
Yes. Yeah, I know he's still out there somewhere, not too far away from the White House,
sitting in his basement watching basketball, eating Cheetos, and tearing the country down.
That's right. There you go. So, yeah, we're trying not in the program tonight to mention the President B. I'll just say it that way, because otherwise this video will never see the light of day.
Refer to it as the Biden administration.
Yeah, that's some people would definitely do that. We'll just call it the current administration.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. All right. So my next issue that relates to sort of more foreign policy is socialism and autocracy in Western civilization. You know where I'm coming from with that?
Yeah, no, I know exactly where you're coming from.
Yeah.
I would say, if something doesn't change really, really quickly, that's a 10. So when I started graduate school in criminology and correctional administration in 1976, I went to a small Christian college in Indiana. And, I read about Marx and that type of thing. But my first encounter was a book called Critique of Legal Order by a guy named Quinney.
Hmm.
And it was just pure Marxism. So I knew pretty much right away, okay, this is what I'm dealing with. And I went as a graduate assistant in the office next to the professor who made me read that book. And I told him, I said, Bob, he's a young PhD, brilliant guy. And I said, Bob, I'm gonna read this, but don't make me read this garbage anymore. Okay. You're going to give me an A, because I'll give you the answers that you want, but this is just absolute nonsense. And deep down, you know this. But look, that was in criminology at Indiana State University, Terre Haute, Indiana in 1976.
Hmm.
Now it's just embedded everywhere. And I hate the gaslighting that goes on. You bring it up, you're doing this, well, we're not doing critical race theory. What are you talking about? We don't do this in school. Then the NEA and American Federation of Teachers come out and say, we're going to implement critical race theory and policy in schools everywhere and fight for it. And I just said this to somebody today, that hopefully people need to realize that 1984 was a horror novel, not a user manual.
Well said.
And so I think these people, they're getting they're using it like a policy manual or whatever.
Right.
What they're doing, and it's unbelievable what's going on.
Well, let me ask this question. This is still has both domestic but also very important foreign policy issues, and that is the crisis in the dollar, the potential failure of the United States currency as the reserve currency of the world. The new central bank, the Great Reset, all these things are all sort of wrapped around kind of the same core issue, which is Bretton Woods is, no longer the way that the world is going to work, and things are changing rapidly.
I'm going to put that at about a 5.
Okay.
Just because I don't know what replaces it. Something has to replace it.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't know that we're quite there yet in terms of having something to replace it. I know China wants to do this. They don't, and there are agreements coming between China and Saudi Arabia and Russia and all this stuff. But I just don't know that they've got a system in place to replace the oil dollar, if you will, as the reserve currency of the world. Right. So now maybe part of that is to get myself so I can sleep at night. But
do you know where your money is right now?
Well, I do. I'm actually rolling over some money, so hopefully I know where it's sitting, and there's supposed to be a check mailed to me this week, but
that's good.
So I can roll it over to another financial advisor. Right. But
all right,
what little I have, but the
the Great Reset, the
Great Reset, yeah.
The G2 I have is that we're moving to a single central bank. Everyone in the world will have a single number, and everything will be digital. And so that's where they're going. The question is, to your point, is how long will it take to get there?
Yeah. So look, how much? Like I said, 2 years ago, we wouldn't have called almost anything that happened. We knew there was this beast system coming. We knew that there's going to be some kind of change in the currency. And so they come out with this Great Reset thing. And then they talk about the Great Reset. And then they said, well, no, we don't really mean the Great Reset. That's just the terminology that we're using. Well, but it means something. And you've seen this website that they have, I'm sure, the strategic intelligence part of the World Economic Forum website. It kind of almost looks like a COVID picture with all the interconnected things. And there's like 272 topics. It's one of the most amazing. I don't know how they organized it. I'm sure it was artificial intelligence of somehow, but and it's all laid out there. I mean, they were talking about, I've been very concerned about the passport thing and the implementation of the Chinese social credit system through that passport. I saw this about the passport, the Chinese social credit system a couple of years ago. Wired magazine, I don't know when Wired magazine had in fact, I used Photoshop version of their graphic of the guy standing on a platform. That's where I got the idea, deplatforming humanity, for my talk in Canada. And it was sort of abstract. Well, yeah, that's China. Okay. But I think as Naomi Wolf, a feminist who I don't necessarily agree with, but she's been very vocal about the implementation of this thing. And I was just listening to her the other day on Bannon's War Room, and it's here. It's just here. I mean, they're talking about everybody in Canada will have to be vaccinated with a vaccine passport by early next year, or you won't be able to go buy or sell. In fact, things have been communicated to me is that in some parts of Canada or Australia right now, like in a Walmart, they've already roped off areas that unvaccinated people will be allowed into to buy medicine and food. Everything else will be off limits to them. This has come very, very fast. And I discussed it in a talk, and I got a strike on YouTube for it.
Yes.
And so the strike is sort of like a marker that you're telling the truth. You're hitting close to home.
It's the red badge of courage.
And it comes so quickly. So here's where I can put in this. I've mentioned this a number of times because it's had a big impact on me. I live in the Columbus, Ohio area. In Northeast Columbus is New Albany. New Albany is the town of the Limited, Bath and Body Works, and Victoria's Secret, Les Wexner. It's where Jeffrey Epstein lived next door to Les Wexner for a number of years in a 12,000 square foot home that Wexner's wife called the cottage.
Oh, God. Oh,
Wexner's estate next door is the main house is 67,000 square feet. It's one of the largest private homes in the world, probably.
Yeah, global,
let alone the US.
Right.
So there's these huge warehouses and everything out there for all of these companies. Now, Wexner's pretty much backed away, by the way, because of the Epstein connection. And he had the largest private residence in Manhattan.
Wow. Yes.
And he sold it to Epstein for like $1.
Yeah.
It was like 25,000 square feet or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was right off Fifth Avenue there. So anyway, so I'm going down to a calling hours at a funeral home in a town south of New Albany. And I drive down this road, hadn't driven down it for years. Doug, it creeped me out. There in this farm field near where I had friends live, there were 2 completed, 2 pretty much on the way, and 1, maybe 20% completed server buildings for Facebook. These buildings are 1,200 feet long. They are as long as the Empire State Building is tall. Golly. 5 of them laying on their side in a field. Facebook spent over $1 billion. Now understand, they store data in bits and bytes of information, and they have to build 5 Empire State Buildings at this server farm to do it. Across the road, Google announced a $1 billion plan to construct its server farm there. And they just came out last week and said they're going to do an additional expansion of $1.2 billion of server farms that they're building on the northwest side of Columbus. There are all these low white buildings, no names on them, high secure fencing, redundant generators, power substations for power generation. And the rumor is, and I'm pretty sure it's true, that those are Amazon server farms. So here within 20 minutes of my house is our friend Ben. I think you I'm talking about. I talked to him about it one day, and he said, John, that's the mind of the beast. And I have to say, I think you're right. I mean, that all of these massive buildings to store bits and bytes of data, then you layer on top of that, and as Naomi Wolf says, the social credit system. Listen, they'll say it's the vaccine passport, but once they just have to flip a couple switches to add everything in your life. And we all know that there's this intrusion by particularly Facebook, literally be thinking about something. And all of a sudden, all these ads start appearing in your Facebook feed for what you've been thinking about. Now, maybe it was because you actually clicked on a website that had something, and now all of a sudden you're getting hit with all of these
targeted advertisements.
But this is what's happening in these buildings close to me. Amazon the same way. I mean, you know how it is. You look at something, or you go back to the Best Buy website and, hey, you looked at this the last 2 times you were here. Maybe you really want to, sure you don't want to buy it this time. But so the annoyance of that is also offset with the bad people implementing more with that and just flipping a few switches, and they've got everything that they want in terms of control.
Right.
What I said, did I say a 5 or whatever? I forget what we started.
Yeah, you said we started off on this really with talking about the dollar, the central banking, where is the reserve currency, the failure of reserve currency, and how is that going to affect America? Will, if the dollar fails, will America crumble as well, and so forth?
Look, I say 5, okay, but I would also say that it's 2 clicks away from like a 19 in your scale.
So it's maybe a 5, but you better keep your eye on this one.
Look, and I tell people I was in Walmart the other day. I was shocked at the empty aisles in the food section, where they have canned goods and that type of thing. It's pretty well organized, but it was pretty shocking, Doug, the sparseness of some of the shelves. Now, I don't know if Costco and like Kroger and some of the other grocery stores that I go to, and I do the shopping just because I want to monitor this, but people need to do some prepping. You need to have a month's supply, at least a month's supply of food stored up.
Yes, I heard you say that Sunday.
And I would say 6 months might be better, because this thing can shift very, very quickly. And if you don't think it can shift quickly, go back to the beginning of 2020. Sometime early this year, I said, how far into 2021 are we going to get before we're lamenting or yearning for the wonderful days of 2020?
Right.
And it only took a couple months. And 2020 wasn't all that great.
Yeah, that's the measure right there.
I feel like I'm this giant wet blanket.
Well, see, I'm forcing you to this, but there's a method to my madness, right?
I guess I'm going to get a score at the end, and I'm going to.
Well, it probably won't be much different than the score I'd come up with myself.
So a 5,
a 5, but yeah,
but 2 clicks away
from a 19. Yeah. All right. So the hits just keep on coming. So here we go. All right. How about the crisis at the southern border?
Well,
that destroy America?
I would say it's pretty high up there. It's at least an 8.
Okay.
Because it's totally out of control. It's
put 8.5 for you on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And understand, is your scale sort of like the earthquake scale that each one?
No, it's not exponential. No, it's not exponential.
Well, okay, then maybe we ought to do a 9 on this one, because this is very troubling, because it is, we saw the influx of refugees supposedly from Syria in 2015. And isn't it amazing that the Syrian refugees can come from a war-torn country and end up at the gates of Vienna, or in Europe?
Yes.
In massive numbers, and they have to cross a sea and this type of thing. And so so my comment back in 2016 with the Europe thing was, and now we know that a lot of those people, I had a graphic that showed where these people came from in the Schengen zone. Schengen zone or whatever they call that thing in Europe. And the flow was really, it was out of Syria pretty heavy, but it was just as heavy out of Afghanistan and Iran and Iraq and other countries in the Middle East. Mm-hmm. And my comment at the time was, it's an interesting historical fact that, when Napoleon went to Russia and we invaded, went to North Africa and Europe and Italy and all these things in World War II, it was always common for the invading army to provide their own transportation. Mm. But in 15 and 16, we were shipping, they were being shipped there somehow by somebody else, sometimes by the governments that they were ultimately designed to control. So I don't think we could take this Islamic jihadi aspect of end times thing. I think this is very significant. Mm-hmm. Now we have it on our southern border. And I made the same comment too, as my grandmother lived in Dayton, Ohio. My cousins and I went out one day. My cousin and I said, hey, let's walk by this place and let's walk by this place. Okay, so I'm like 8 years old. We go out and we walk, and we figured later we walked 10 miles. And I thought I was going to die by the time we got back home, because we did 10 miles in like 4 hours. And my poor little, 6-year-old brother we were dragging him over fences and all this other stuff. Mm. But then I'm thinking, it's 1,200 miles across Mexico. How do these people, they just all of a sudden show up, but they're not walking. They're being transported to the border by somebody. Somebody's funding this thing. And it's somebody that doesn't have the U.S. best interest at heart. Right. And I think we can make a lot of wild guesses as to who it is, mm-hmm. At least partially. Mm-hmm. I also want to remind people that back during the administration prior to Trump, there was a scam that was foisted on the American people by that administration. Remember all the multi-billion-dollar settlements with the financial institutions and that type of thing? And, we're doing this to protect the consumers. Where did that money go, Doug? That money was funneled through a chain of things to left-wing NGOs. Yeah. Yes. To fund. This is why it's so hard to fight these people, because all this money, they've been, well, in this case I had, money laundering was a big issue. Mm-hmm. Listen, and so here I am during it was during the Bush administration, but then followed by administration that does money laundering on an epic scale to fund these things, and they get away with it. So yeah, funding this immigration thing, and it's out of control. I mean, I saw tonight, it was like, compared to a year ago, it's up like 244%. And it's like 180,000 people this month or so far this month.
Yeah, it's over 200,000 actually.
And it's going to be 2.5 million.
Yeah.
Just from the southern border.
Right.
Now you layer on top of this 160,000 Afghans that have been brought into the country, or they say 67,000.
Yeah.
Not vetted. Mm-hmm. And it's clear that, from the eyewitness testimony of people like Glenn Beck, whether you agree with him theologically or not, mm-hmm. he was trying to get Christians out. So praise the Lord for that.
Yeah.
But he's, we got 6 planes sitting on the tarmac in Kabul full of Americans. And he had Christians in planes that were forced by the State Department to turn around and go back and get somebody else and bring them out.
Let's bridge nicely to another topic, which I'll take at this point, which is ineffective administrative policies from our federal government. How fatal could that be fatal
under the current regime? You got to give them at least a 9.
Okay.
And that's because I'm tired of giving everything a 10 or a 19.
Right. Right. Well, you're scoring pretty high right now, so which of course at the end of this, I'll give you the.
I will also say this. I did an interview the other night with a guy in New Zealand.
Yeah.
I have a very strange sense of peace in my own
in your own
personal
life. Yeah.
I see and then maybe that's the Lord thing, the God thing that's doing that, because
Yeah.
it's dark out there.
It is.
What pierces the darkness? Light.
Light does.
That's what we have. So
absolutely, we have peace that passes understanding. Oh yeah, no, that's right. I don't disagree. I feel kind of the same way. I feel like there's the storm raging around us, but we know we are in the boat with the master. And so,
but it's kind of strange too, because I live in a nice, community.
Mhm.
I go play golf a couple times a week, and I go to the driving range 4 or 5 days a week and hit golf balls. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, the world is really going to hell in a handbasket. And here I am hitting range balls.
Yeah.
And there's this weird juxtaposition.
Yeah.
But
yes, irony is not lost on you.
Right.
That's good. Okay. We hit that one pretty well. How about this one? The continuing pandemic in the USA.
Let's see. So I don't know if I should give it a 1 or a 10.
Yeah. Well,
the only reason I'm sort of joking, because I get emails from people all the time, like, I don't know what to believe.
Mm-hmm.
So we know it is the strangest thing I've ever seen. And we know there's this passage in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 that talks, God will send great delusion so that they'll believe the lie.
Right.
Now, we don't know exactly what that is, or how that's implemented, but it's hard not to see how it's going to be implemented in this day and age. I mean, there's no question that it can be implemented pretty easily, because I don't think I've ever seen anything more confusing. Pam and I were just talking about this tonight at dinner. You read this report, this report, this report, this causes this causes this. No, it's a pandemic of the unvaccinated, but then the data comes out and doesn't really support that, but they still push this narrative. And there was an example just yesterday in Rolling Stone, put out this thing about the horse dewormer overdoses that were flooding hospitals in, I think it was Oklahoma, so that they couldn't take care of gunshot victims.
Yeah.
And it was so apparent from somebody, even, and Rachel Maddow tweeted it out, and all these left-wing people tweeted it out. And a guy was on CNN saying, well, yeah, it turned out not to be true, but it could have been true, given the way these unvaccinated conservatives, right-wing terrorist extremists, there's this giant narrative that's been created from this thing that happened back in January. And I talk about it almost every week. All these reports come out that push this narrative. But has anything happened since January 6th that's significant of any of the people of that ideology? It's nothing. But they continue to push it. They just dropped a bunch of subpoenas on fellow members of Congress for all of their cell phone data, and text messages and emails and that type of thing. We're so far down the road on this. So listen, I'm going to put it up there at least a 9, because it is at a sort of critical mass, right? Yeah, we're at, I think it used to be 14 days to flatten the curve. Now I think it's 14 booster shots to flatten the curve.
Thank you, Dr. Fauci. Okay, I got a couple more for you here. Let's see, the crisis and civil unrest, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, riots in the cities.
Oh, wait, is there riots in the cities?
There certainly have been.
Really?
Not in the last few weeks, but we certainly
there was some shooting in Portland. I saw that the Portland mayor of Portland, which seems to be the insider that in Seattle of the ANTIFA protests, the mayor of Portland came out yesterday and said that because of this abortion law in Texas, we're banning travel from Portland government people to Texas. And my reaction was, that's a win for Texas. Yeah. I mean, we don't want those people coming there. They don't want those people coming there.
Oh my goodness.
And, but yeah, look, this is, and the whole narrative about it. I mean, what's going on in Minneapolis, miles of neighborhoods burned down.
Yeah.
Uh,
Happily about 25, 30 miles from where I live now, here in the Minneapolis area.
and
So
it's happening everywhere.
mhm.
I see. I mean, back to the pandemic thing for a minute. This requirement of vaccination or you'll be fired.
Right.
I've been contacted by big city people in big city police departments who are organizing a protest.
Mm.
I saw that in Australia, I think they filed a case against the mandatory vaccine mandates that are coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at this point in time, the only thing that might work is mass resistance. Make them fire 1,000 cops in a big city in the midst of a crime wave.
Yeah.
Make them fire half of their nursing staff in the midst of a pandemic.
Right.
And a surge in the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
So now back to what were we talking about?
We're talking about the crisis and civil unrest, and is the United States really at the brink of some kind of a civil war?
I'm going to say 9.5 because I think
the scale is going up here. Right?
Yeah, I know. I just I've given too many tens. I don't want to depress people, but I talk to people, okay, and I have a lot of contacts.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of people that are really upset with the way that it's going.
Right.
I don't know what they'll do about it. The courts are closed off to us by and large. That would oppose some of these things, and a certain rich immigrant, now U.S. citizen, who has funded prosecutors in a lot of cities like St. Louis and San Francisco, Los Angeles, and you can't talk about it, but it's clear. I mean, I think Newt Gingrich got shut down for mentioning who it was.
Yeah, yeah.
So I prepared a thing in one of my updates to respond to that. And it took me 5 minutes to find about 40 articles in the mainstream press who were talking about this person funding these prosecutors.
Wow.
It's
not like it was done in secret.
From the New York Times, the Washington Post, all of these things. And they talked about it. But now when we talk about it, it's, oh, you can't talk about that. What was it Minneapolis that the guy got let out on bail? He was domestic abuse, and it was
I don't know.
the bail reform organization that Vice President Kamala Harris had supported. And so the guy was released like 2 weeks ago. Now he's been arrested for murder. And then you go out to all of these, California enacts a law that anything under $1,000 is not a felony anymore. And so lo and behold, everybody's stealing. They must carry like little calculators when they go into.
John, I heard that there was literally a couple of people that loaded up a shopping cart and took it out of the store.
Yeah, I've seen videos of it. I was in San Francisco 2 years ago for a conference. And it's just, I get off this, I flew to Oakland and I took the BART over and got off there at Market Street, right in the heart of the business district of San Francisco to go to my hotel. And at the exit from the subway, from the BART station, once you got out through the gate where you would, show your pass, from there to the street, there were about 30 people sleeping on the floor of the subway station.
Yeah.
And I love San Francisco. I've been there many times.
Great city. Love it. Yeah.
Not anymore. I changed my hotel because I read an article. I was reading the reviews of the hotel where I was going to stay. And the people said, we never took our shoes off it was a Hilton property, in our hotel room, because there was so much poop on the streets that we were afraid that the carpet was contaminated. This is in San Francisco.
Yep.
I posted a picture on my Facebook page of Kensington Avenue in Philadelphia with the people being drug addicted. One of our Senate candidates here in Ohio, J.D. Vance, wrote a book called Hillbilly Elegy about the opioid crisis. I did a lot of work for the state of Ohio on discovery issues for the big opioid litigation. It's a huge crisis of these drugs and everything.
Oh, yeah.
And then, so you layer on top of that, these people not being prosecuted. And we've really come to the lawlessness of what Revelation and the other prophets talk about. I think
Mhm.
we're there.
Yeah.
It's in the United States, especially. And I hear it's the same in the UK and France and other countries. It's a worldwide problem.
Well, it's maybe not in China. It's the crumbling of Western civilization, and that's what we're seeing. All right, here's a less.
This is an upbeat one.
This is an upbeat one. Yes. Here we go. Gender confusion.
You know, I'll give it a 7 just
right.
because I think that even non-Christian people can see the ludicrousness of this. But the fact that we're here is very troubling. I mean, you see people like Abigail Schreier, who's written a book about it, about the confusion and the exponential increase, particularly among young girls, teenage girls, that are claiming that they need to transition to being a male.
Yeah.
It's and so our favorite quote machine, one of my favorite quote machines, beyond Jen Psaki, I call her Jen Zuckerberger because she kind of looks like she almost looks like she's a twin to Mark Zuckerberger. Look at pictures of them side by side.
Okay.
And then another quote machine that I always like is Congresswoman AOC.
Mm-hmm, of course.
And she was talking today about the Texas law and says, you know, this is an attack on menstruating people who give birth. You know, she won't say says it's woman.
Oh gosh.
But now, you know, so it's birthing people or menstruating people who give birth because they can't say that it's female.
Identify one gender or the other. Right.
And these are people that are kind of in charge. You
know.
know, I spent a lot of time in Boston over the years, and it was, you know,
yeah,
there were a lot of crazy college students up there that their minds were being warped. Even 20 years ago.
That's true. I worked there for about 5 years, and I had a delightful time. But it was, but I wasn't, dealing with issues on the campus itself.
Right, but you would run into them if you got on the.
Oh yeah, well, I drove by Harvard and MIT every day.
Yeah, and I had a case in Cambridge for several years. But this is, what did I say, a 7?
Yeah, I think
that's only because I think that it's in its heart, it's so silly and anti-science that it's even coming up. That I think even, unregenerate people, for years on my prophecy update, I had a graphic that I borrowed from the Wall Street Journal, and it was a picture of the Earth, a globe, focused on the Middle East, and then there was a fuse that was burning. They ended up down in Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And I used that graphic for years till I shifted to the one that you see here. So I thought a couple months ago I just would trot out, because things were heating up in the Middle East. So I thought, I'm just going to use the old graphic. They took down my video.
Wow.
Because it was promoting violent extremism. And I'm like, this is a Wall Street Journal graphic. Now they eventually they accepted my appeal, but it was like, why are they hassling me about that?
Oh yeah.
And the other stuff that they let, like Trump can't have a Twitter account, but the Taliban can. I have a graphic in my mind that I'm going to come up with. I'm sure it won't get me banned, but at some point I'll trot it out. I was thinking about that this morning.
Okay, so that was a good segue to the last of these 10 issues, which is interesting because it'll be interesting to see how you react to this. Iran, Iraq, Israel, and the Middle East.
Well, look, it's with the withdrawal of the United States, or the alignment of the current regime with the mullahs of Iran. This is going to be a 10.
Okay.
Because God is not mocked.
Mm-hmm.
We just had the 5th strongest hurricane to hit the United States, Ida. And it went up through the country, and then it hit New York.
Hurt New York more than it hurt Louisiana, at least as far as
I think 45 or 50 people dead. from flash flooding and everything.
Mhm.
And this is just this extreme. So we have this drought all over the West, and reservoirs at all-time record lows. They're implementing drought procedures, and it's hot out there. And then we're just kind of getting into the drought season anyway, and it's already bad. And then we have flash flooding elsewhere, and it's this weird juxtaposition that we have these weather events. But this one, that thing was a tropical storm, and Naftali Bennett went to the White House, and it almost immediately turned into what eventually was the 5th strongest hurricane by the measure they used to hit the United States. Now, and it did tremendous damage down in Louisiana. It didn't hit New Orleans direct. It was just kind of a glancing blow, but 1 million people out of power. So, Bill Koenig, this is his thing that he talks about all the time. What you do something to Israel, something bad is going to happen. And we think back to Katrina. Actually ran into an Orthodox Jew. My flight got delayed coming back from Tel Aviv in 2011. And the conversation, somehow Dave Barry's column on his colonoscopy came up. And so we sat there and talked, and he handed me his computer. And we talked for 4 hours. Now, you may find it hard to believe that I could talk to anybody for 4 hours, but since
we've done pretty well with us so far. So
I've overcome that innate shyness I joke with my wife about.
Right.
She goes, "You were never shy, get over it." But he talked about Katrina and how we were forcing them to evacuate Gaza. And he said, you Christians, you need to understand, you do something to Israel, God watches this. And so we immediately were talking about Bible prophecy. And he said, you got to tell people, John, you got to tell people that the same percentage of land that we had to evacuate relative to the size of Israel was the same percentage of land relative to the size of the United States that had to be evacuated in Katrina. He said, you cannot dismiss the parallels. They're there and they're unmistakable. So now we have this regime in charge that wants to, I don't know what they're thinking, that somehow if they're nice to Iran, there won't be a problem. Iran has been a problem for a lot of years. There was a guy, his last name began with, first name I, last name began with an M. He was the guy behind the barracks bombing in Beirut back in the, what was that, 1982, 83, during the Reagan administration. A couple 250 Marines killed. And he may have been the mastermind behind a lot of the 9/11 stuff as well. He was assassinated in Lebanon about 2008, 2009, in the same general area that Hariri had been assassinated in a car bomb a few years before, the prime minister of Lebanon. But you have all these countries that are under this Iranian influence, and Hezbollah, and what they have done is they've been very clever about putting in place this Islamic jihadist command and control structure that infiltrates the local society population with social service structures and that type of thing. Hezbollah does this in large portions of Lebanon. It's doing it in Syria and the area around the Golan. And this is how Iran operates. This is how they've operated in Iraq. And I think Iran is kind of the epicenter. They've just put in a radical conservative guy to head up to be the president. They've just put in a cabinet that's full of radicals. And that Iranian model, though, has also been implemented by the Taliban in Afghanistan. And so that while the U.S. on its surface, and I think there's a lot of people that need to answer for things, the thing in Afghanistan, they did special forces ops and everything, did great at driving out the Taliban in the first couple of years, but then it was the military bureaucracy, who I know you're not a fan of, that kind of came in and changed everything. And so everything's getting better. Everything's for 20 years, for 18 years, they're saying it's
Right.
getting better. And then
Shifted into nation building as opposed to just basically taking care of the terrorist known as Al Qaeda that were being trained there.
So I think Sam Faddis has a good article of his AND magazine right now about we did it the whole wrong way. We should have kept the sort of the asymmetrical thing that was working as opposed to this massive military buildup. And what happened? We left and now they have this strong. They have all this military equipment. Some of it's disabled. I'll grant you that, but a lot of it's not. And the Humvees and everything are already. A lot of them are in Iran already. So that's kind of interesting because remember I mentioned the logistics thing at the beginning.
Right.
I haven't talked about my U thing in the ACLU. I'll do that in just a moment. But the logistics thing is, Iran, maybe their army needs built. Well, now the army's been built up quite a bit just in the last week. And you cannot dismiss Pakistan. I heard an old interview on Dennis Prager yesterday of a guy who wrote a book called War. He was embedded in the most remote area of Afghanistan with a military unit. And he talked about the cohesiveness of the unit, the camaraderie and everything. But in that group who, they had people who would go out to buy a goat that were helping them. And they had their throats slit by the Taliban because the Taliban even then had embedded itself in this command and control structure throughout the society, which is the Iranian model. And the leadership, well, when we drove them out of Pakistan or out of Afghanistan, they went to Pakistan, they went to Iran, and they went to Qatar. Do you remember Bo Bergdahl?
Oh, yeah.
In the prisoner swap that was made for him?
I know where you're going with this. Go ahead.
4 of the 5 that were swapped for him that we let out in Gitmo because, they're just going to go to Qatar and live out their days. 4 of those 5 are now in the cabinet of the Taliban government in Afghanistan.
Heard that today.
Thank you, prior regime.
Yeah.
Pre-Trump regime.
Right.
And this Pakistan thing is a big deal. So the guys in this war, this remote, U.S. Special Forces group that's up there occupying Tehran in the midst of just this terrible stuff. What they hated, the one more than the Taliban, they hated Pakistan because Pakistan was arming the people, arming the Taliban. It was training the Taliban. And the Taliban Laura Logan has talked about this as well many times recently, about how the Taliban, when they were kicked out, some went to Iran, some went to Qatar, some went to Pakistan. And Pakistan is a pivot point on this. So this goes to this whole Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan thing. You need to include Pakistan. China has many advisors in Afghanistan already.
Yeah.
I mentioned Sunday that China, there was a great series in the South China Morning Post about 5 or 6 aspects of the China Belt and Road Initiative, one of which was a road from Western China down through Pakistan to the port, the new huge port that China's built called Gwadar on the ocean there, just across the Afghan border into Iran. Well, yeah, Afghan's not on the ocean, but across the Pakistan-Iran border is a giant Iranian terminal that's been built that will allow them to bypass the Persian Gulf. So there's a lot of scrambling going on. So for example, and I think this plays into kind of a Psalm 83 alliance that our friend Bill Salas talks about. Jordan, Egypt have developed this pipeline to bypass Israel to get gas and fuel to Lebanon. And Iran is supplying Lebanon through Hezbollah. Lebanon is in total meltdown. So I don't know how this is all playing out exactly. I do know that something's going to trigger a lot of war in the Middle East. Israel has released report after report. I saw a interview yesterday in one of the Israeli language Hebrew press, like it begins with a Mahariv or something like that, with the guy who's the head of their Iran unit. And it's a very long interview. If you can get it, yeah, I would read it. It will help you understand that Israel is preparing for war, but it's not a war with Hezbollah in Lebanon like what happened in 2006, 15 years ago. This is INSS, one of their think tanks. They issued a report called The Next Great War in the North.
I wrote a book called The Next Great War in the Middle East.
Right. And so this is a PDF. And the one thing I love about this is everybody's publishing these great graphic PDFs now.
Oh, yeah.
Like the World Health Organization a week ago published a whole big thing, 99 pages about vaccine passports and how they're implemented.
Right.
Oh, by the way, it was funded by the Rockefeller Foundation and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Aha.
But it also had a disclaimer, though, that we're not changing any of our opinions because of who funded us. That got me to sleep real quick.
Pay no attention to that man behind the curtains.
That's right.
It's not having any effect.
That's what I wondered too. Is I keep thinking about this. Like who's the Wizard of Oz that's running all this thing right now? Because it seems like there's somebody,
the cabal,
somebody's behind it.
Yeah.
And I've never been a big conspiracy theorist guy. I always say I only believe the conspiracy theories that are true.
Yeah.
And some of the ones I always thought were kind of out there on the fringe. Now I'm out there on the fringe, but I have plenty of company. That's nice. So the last part of my ACLU thing, which I think goes here with the Iran, Iraq, jihadi. You have Libya also in this. You have Turkey. Certainly, I've wrote articles about Turkey and Erdogan especially. And even though Turkey has all these financial trouble, last quarter they had the most rapidly expanding economy in the world. How's this happen? And they built the largest airport in the world is Istanbul. They're building another canal Istanbul, between the Aegean Sea and the Black Sea.
I think George Friedman predicted about 5 years ago that Turkey was going to be one of the hottest countries to be a part of during the next 30 years or so.
Yeah, and they've been up and down and everything, but this Erdogan guy just seems to he's like the Teflon Don of the jihadis, and what he does. So the last thing that I think kind of plays into this, my U and my ACLU. So we have acceleration, convergence, logistics, and U is understanding. And I've been very focused, I think, on these passages in Daniel 11 and 12 that talk about in the end, Daniel sealed the book till the time of the end. But at the time of the end, there will be men of the understanding. I did a talk in Bakersfield a number of years ago called the Masculine, the men of understanding. The wise will understand and instruct the many.
Yeah.
So I think we're at that stage, and I hope I'm one of the wise guys.
Right. Yeah, one of the wise guys.
That helps people understand. I mean, I think that's one of the goals of my ministry.
Yeah.
And what I'm trying to do is you need to understand that there's just this incredible intertwined convergence and acceleration of all these things that are going on.
Right.
And I think as we get closer to the end, we'll understand. I use the example in some of my talks of the eye chart. I'm nearsighted. So when I go to the eye doctor and he tells me to take off my glasses, I can get the E just because I've memorized that one at the top of the chart. The rest of it is just, I can't see it.
Yeah.
But if I take my glasses off, even with my glasses off, and I walk and I get closer to that chart, I can read, I'm way down below, 2010. I can read the stuff below that because I'm closer to the target.
Yeah.
And I see better. I don't know how quickly this thing wraps up, to be honest with you.
Well, a lot of people, of course, want to, they want to peg the generation of 70 or 80 years, and they tie that back to 1948. And they say, well, that basically says that 2021, 2022, if you're a dispensationalist and believe in pre-tribulation, then what that suggests is that your, rapture is going to happen within the next month or two.
And so, we did a panel. I don't think you were on the panel, but it was Bill Salas, Doug Krieger, me, and Chris Putnam, moderated by the Hagmans in that 2014 conference. But it got a little bit testy, and I didn't really say much till the end, except I remember what I said, and you can find it. I'm sure you can find the video of it online. I said, "Hey, I love everybody," because it devolved into a debate between Bill and Doug about the pre-trib rapture. And I said, "Listen, I love everybody. I have my own preference as to how it works out. Certainly, pre-trib is the greatest way." But I said, we're all in this together, and eventually somebody will be proven wrong on the timing of the rapture.
Right.
Because it hasn't happened yet. And so I often say, you got these events in the future, and we do the best we can to speculate and kind of try to figure out how they're going to work out. I can just tell you that I've kind of blown up all that stuff that I've had, although there are certain broad, big themes. You've got the Babylon thing, you've got the Israel thing, and you've got, I think, this jihadi thing, this Islamic thing is an important component of all of this. I've not been impressed, I will be honest with you, with the revived Roman Empire. I don't see Europe agreeing on anything in the near term. So now, everybody says that.
I'll interrupt you just for a second. That was the first sentence in the book, The Final Babylon, is Rome has not revived.
Well, I think it's kind of, even since when did you write that thing?
We wrote it in 2012 and debuted it in 2013.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I remember when it came out, and it was one of the things that helped me sort of start thinking, like, maybe we don't have this all quite. Here's a perspective that I think is worthy of consideration, because when you read Jeremiah 50:51,
right,
and apply it to the world that's existing at this time, it's kind of hard. It's kind of easy to where you conclude. And that's the other thing we all need to remember about Bible prophecy, is that it will unfold in a real world that people are living in.
Yes.
And so
that should be a sobering thought.
Well, there was this prophecy about a virgin shall conceive and bear a son and call his name Emmanuel. But I don't know how prominent that prophecy was in Israel between the 700 BC period when Isaiah wrote it and the birth of the Messiah. Were they running around checking virgin women from the tribe of Judah?
Second Temple period doesn't suggest that was not their expectation. That's, of course, they viewed that the Messiah would be chosen, but he would not be divine, and so there would be no need for a virgin birth.
But then we have in Matthew, it says, and this was that which was prophesied,
correct,
by the prophet Isaiah, behold, a virgin shall conceive. And so I'm thinking, like, I think they missed that one.
Yeah, they missed a few things, but yes, especially that one. Right.
But then the applying that to us, what are we missing? And that's why I think this youth thing is a big deal, this understanding.
Yeah.
That as we get closer to the end, a lot of these things that we thought were obscure and irrelevant, they're going to kind of like spring to life.
Yeah.
That's what I think. So, maybe I'm overthinking it, but that's just sort of how I've kind of developed in my way.
Well, let me put we're going to wrap.
All the hate mail goes to Doug.
To me, yes, that's right. Doug at faithhappens.com. So let me wrap it this way. You averaged the score you came up with was 86.5, which means it's an 8.65 per each of these 10 questions, which what I've decided is that what that really means is it basically says call hospice.
Yeah. Order the therapeutic.
That's right. It's this is a subject that is not going to revive, which of course is I've been saying that for about the last 6 or 7 years. And
the trajectory that we're on, it just seems like it doesn't unwind at this point.
The patient cannot be saved. And here's the thing. We talked about 10 really meaty issues. I want to just mention 10 more issues that we did not talk about. other than just very cursory. We
Okay.
didn't talk about the opioid crisis, but just a little bit. We didn't really
Unbelievable.
talk about freedom of speech, invasion of privacy. Those issues kind of go together, and they're, of course, part of the big issue with the technology companies and what they're doing. Then you have sort of technology itself, artificial intelligence, transhumanism, human being 2.0, the destruction of the middle class. We didn't mention climate change.
Yeah.
We didn't really address directly the impact of radical Islam across the world. We didn't talk about the shortage of clean water, which is becoming more and more of a crisis.
Yes.
We didn't talk about worldwide starvation. And the last issue I'll mention in honor of L.A. Marzulli is we didn't mention the alien invasion. So
yeah. Well, maybe we can do another one, and if we're still here in a month. And,
yeah, exactly.
We'll do another one, and we'll score those. And I'm going to guess right now, I will prophesy that the average score in those will be very similar to what we are.
Very
here.
similar, yeah. So it's right.
Yeah, and those are. Yeah, I will always say that it's artificial intelligence, not real wisdom.
Yeah,
that's
good. Well said. Well, so now here's what I propose. As we've been talking through this, I thought, well, one of the subjects I wanted to get with you about is really talk about, kind of look at the prophetic scenario, and let's think about how does it really stand up and how has it really changed? And I'm going to suggest boldly that you and I and Doug Krieger, maybe Eric Barger, he's pretty close to Jan Markell, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And he's, he would fit kind of squarely in the dispensational point of view, I would guess. And so maybe because you're friends with him, maybe we could get the four of us together and I could kind of MC or host, and we just talk about the prophetic scenario and how has it evolved over, let's say over the last 20 years. We don't have to go all the way back to Hal Lindsey, but we can certainly go back to 20 years ago or so and talk about that. So does that sound interesting to you?
Yeah, that sounds great. Love to do that.
All right, let's plan on doing that. We'll see if we can arrange it. I'll talk to Krieger and see if you can send a note off.
Yeah, I'm always afraid. I asked Krieger a question once, and he wrote like a 2-volume book.
It's true.
I mean, it was unbelievable. It was like 900 pages of stuff, and I'm like, so I'm not going to ask him any more questions.
Yeah,
because if he gives me the book, then I got to read it. So.
Well, that's the thing, is that there's a certain point where I finally said to him, okay, you sent me this email. It's very impressive. Could you now write me an executive summary of your email? So,
no kidding.
Well, John, you've been awesome. And I really can't think of anyone better than you to really go through and think about these issues, talk about them. You're because you do this every week, you really hit these issues, these issues. They're probably unfortunate, you would say, for you that they're sort of second nature. You're so close to these things, but I really think that you've given us just a lot of great things to think about.
If you saw my message, my text, the message app on my iPhone, there are probably the person who gets the most text is myself. I'm always sending links to myself to remember about it. And then I will tell you, I used to do this, I do a little teaching like on the 7 churches, and then I do like 20 minutes prophecy update.
Right.
And now it's like, I cut it off after an hour and a half, just because the people that are helping on the tech side need to go home and eat lunch.
Right.
And we never beat the Baptists to the buffet,
never,
ever at our church. So you just need to know that.
You might be let in the pearly gates first, though. So that's a good thing.
Look, I just really, my father loved Bible prophecy, and I constantly think, like, what would he be doing if he was here? Now, look, I grew up in home. We got like 4 newspapers a day and 10 magazines a week. And, Dad always kept current on things. Right. And so I guess I was discipled and trained from a young age to do this.
You followed in his footsteps.
And I don't want to be, I try not to be sensationalistic. But, I have to say, people, we live in very dramatic times.
Mhm.
We thought this, Doug, when we first met back in 2013 or 20,
Yeah, that's on
2013,
2013, something like that. Mhm.
we were talking about this, like this is a significant time. We're 8 years down the road from that.
Mhm.
And that's only exponentialized since then.
That's right. Absolutely. Well, that's probably a good kind of concluding thought for this this session. So again, thanks so much, John. Appreciate it. I hope to
God
get
bless.
this rolling out here, before too many days go past. And hopefully, folks, that you all that are listening in and viewing this, do share it with your friends. If you can do me a favor and be sure to subscribe to this channel, that will help me. Ring that little bell too, so that when I send these things out, a new show, which I try to do one a week, but you'll know when it's available. So, all right, for John Hallard, this is Doug Woodward, and God bless you, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.